On a quiet afternoon in New Jersey, patrol officers rushed to Breakwater Road after multiple 911 calls about a maniacal driver nearly killing people. Witnesses watched in terror as a pickup truck swerved across lanes, mounted curbs, and almost slammed into oncoming traffic. But when officers arrived at the scene, they found something that would change everything. Their own police lieutenant, so drunk he could barely stand, with a blood alcohol level that should have killed him. What happened next was captured entirely on body camera, and it exposed the corruption so deep that officers were willing to risk their own careers to cover it up. This is the story of Lieutenant John Chu, and how one afternoon destroyed the blue wall of silence. On the afternoon of April 27, 2018, Lieutenant John Chu of the New Jersey Police Department was driving his truck down Breakwater Road toward Route 9. But this wasn't ordinary driving. Witnesses watched in horror as Chu swerved across lanes, nearly crashed multiple times, and drove so erratically the concerned neighbors started calling 911. When patrol officers arrived at the scene, they never expected to find their own lieutenant behind the wheel. What happened next would be captured entirely on body camera footage, creating a perfect storm that exposed just how far some cops will go to protect their own, even when they're dead wrong. The responding officers immediately recognized Lieutenant Chu, and you can hear the panic in their voices on the audio. One officer turns to his partner and says, "Hey, LT, how are you doing?" The tone is friendly and casual, like they're meeting for a coffee, instead of responding to a dangerous driving complaint. But here's where it gets interesting. The officers know their body cameras are recording, and they actually discuss this on tape. One officer says to his partner, "My mic is live, my camera, we had an erratic driver call." They're acknowledging that everything is being recorded, yet they still try to find ways around doing their job. At one point, an officer asks if they can turn off their body camera for a conference, essentially asking permission to handle this situation off the record. His partner immediately shuts this down, saying, "We're not going to mute our cameras at all." This moment is crucial because it shows how body cameras have changed police work. 20 years ago, this incident might have been handled with a quiet phone call and a ride home. But with everything being recorded, these officers knew they couldn't just make it disappear. For 5 full minutes, the officers stood around trying to figure out what to do. You can hear them calling other supervisors, trying to get guidance on how to handle arresting their own boss. Finally, they approached Chu's vehicle. "LT, we had an erratic driver call on you," one officer says. "We have to handle this just like anything else." Chu's response is telling. He immediately starts questioning who called in the complaint, saying, "I'd love to know who called. You can find that out, you know that." This is not the response of someone who's innocent, it's the response of someone looking for revenge against whoever dared to report him. When asked to step out of the vehicle, Chu initially complies, but it's clear he's heavily intoxicated. The officers begin standard field sobriety tests, which Chu fails spectacularly. He can't walk in a straight line, can't balance on one foot, and when asked to continue the tests, he simply says, "No, I don't want to complete the tests." This is where the corruption becomes really obvious. Even though Chu has failed the sobriety tests and is clearly drunk, the officers continue to treat him with kid gloves. They're apologetic, almost begging him to cooperate. "We don't want to be put in this position," one officer says. "We don't want to do this to you." When it comes time to handcuff Chu, they don't follow standard procedure. Instead of cuffing him behind his back like they would do any other suspect, they cuff him in the front, a courtesy typically reserved for elderly suspects or those with medical conditions. But Chu's sense of entitlement, it doesn't stop there. When they put him in the police car, he tried to sit in the front seat. Think about that. He's under arrest for drunk driving, and he still thinks he deserves special treatment. The officers have to repeatedly tell him, "You can't do that, sir. You have to sit in the back." Lieutenant Chu's blood alcohol content measured 0.36%, nearly 5 times the legal limit, and at a level considered alcohol poisoning. For context, most people would be unconscious or dead at this level. He was immediately taken to the hospital before being booked. The aftermath was swift, but not as severe as it should have been. Chu was suspended and then fired from the department. He was fined $700 and faced DUI charges. But here's the kicker. There's no record of him serving any jail time, despite driving at a level that could have killed innocent people. The officers who arrested him, they kept their jobs. While they eventually did the right thing by arresting Chu, The fact they even considered covering it up shows how deep the blue wall of silence runs in law enforcement. This case represents a perfect example of how body cameras are changing police accountability. Without that footage, Lieutenant Chu would likely have received a quiet ride home and continued his career. The officers on the scene admitted they didn't want to arrest him, and they clearly tried to find ways around it. But the cameras captured everything: the special treatment, the attempts to go off record, and the preferential handling of a dangerous criminal just because he wore a badge. The footage sparked outrage when it was released, with many questioning how similar incidents happened before body cameras became standard equipment. What makes this case particularly disturbing is Chu's threat to find out who called in the complaint. This shows a vindictive mindset. He wasn't sorry for endangering lives, he was angry at being caught. It's the mentality of someone who believes being a cop puts him above the law. Today, Lieutenant John Chu is no longer in law enforcement. His career ended in disgrace, and his arrest became a textbook example of police corruption in training academies across the country. The officers who arrested him, they still serve within the department, though questions remain about how many other incidents they may have covered up before cameras made it impossible. The case led to stricter policies about body camera usage in the department, with officers now required to keep cameras on during all investigations and facing discipline for any attempts to turn them off during investigations. This is just one of 3 shocking cases we're covering today, where corrupt cops thought they were untouchable. What do you think? Are body cameras enough to hold corrupt officers accountable? Or do we need more systemic changes in how police investigate their own? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more cases like this, where the camera caught everything, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, the next 2 cases will blow your mind even more than this one did.